Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Dallas. I'm Nick Miller alongside Open Series grinder Rudy Briksza. How you doing, sir?
Not too bad. Off to a decent start.
Yeah. Coming off your buys, you got a win here. You're looking to get up into the top 16 of the leaderboard. So you're here in Dallas, traveling, playing Mardu this weekend.
Yes.
What has taken you to this path? Because we've seen you play a bunch of other decks, including Jeskai tokens and things like that.
Okay, so basically I decided to start streaming recently, and I bought into Moto, and what I could afford was red-white aggro. I figured it was the most consistent deck, and it had a lot of play to it, and it had the capacity to beat any deck in the format. So I started with that. This last weekend, last weekend, I played in an IQ, and I was struggling to beat Devotion decks, I was struggling to beat blue-black, and I figured the easiest way to do that would be to play Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is just fantastic against a lot of the control decks, but it's also fine against any Devotion deck you can run into. So that's where it started. After that, it was very easy to add Crackling Doom, which is fantastic for beating a lot of threats that are difficult to deal with. Pelucranos is difficult, Siege Rhino is difficult to deal with, Silumgar, very hard to beat out of blue-black, but Crackling Doom takes care of all of them in a very easy fashion, and a lot of times you can play a 2-drop like Soulfire or Seeker into Crackling Doom and just gain a lot of value off it.
It's interesting you mentioned the transition from red-white to Mardu. That's what we saw at Miami last week at the Grand Prix. A lot of people were transitioning the red-white aggro deck into a Mardu aggro deck. You're more so of the mid-range version we saw early on in the standard season.
Yeah.
But now we have Fate Reforged, and you have 4 copies of Outpost Siege, and you got 3 copies of Soulfire Grandmaster. I say that card wrong literally every time I talk about it. So Siege has been the card that's really powered red-white.
Yes.
I assume it does the same thing here.
Yeah. Luckily,
generating the card advantage.
Essentially, you don't really have too many cards that cost more than 3. You have 2 Butchers, 1 Migmate Rock, and 1 Sorin Solemn Visitor. And after that, I mean, Stokes generally cost less than 4 most of the time, but Outpost Siege allows you to play a lot of different spells this turn, allows you to power through things, and if anybody just watched my last camera match, you can use the Dragon's mode to flat out kill your opponent.
The Grandmaster going alongside Seeker at your 2-drop here. With all the burn, he's just going to generate so much value as the game goes on. Have you got to ever do, start rebuying spells?
Yeah, eventually once you start getting into late game, especially against Abzan, specifically the mid-range and the control decks, you trade off a lot of resources. So after you trade off a bunch of resources, you just have Soulfire to buy back things like Wild Slash or Hordling Outburst or even Crackling Doom.
Now you've got Butcher of Horde. Here's a card Patrick Sullivan's been talking about as a way to start beating the green Devotion decks, especially the green-white deck that just took over Miami.
Right. So Butcher is just a 4-mana 5/4 flyer. And stats alone are fantastic. Just a 4-mana 5/4 flyer. But it has a lot of added bonuses because it can help you protect yourself by blocking very effectively. It attacks very well. Also can gain lifelink. And it can also, you have a little combo with it with Outpost Siege. Because if you have dragons, you can sacrifice a bunch of creatures and ping them for a bunch of damage.
That's what we call a combo.
Yeah.
All right, so you've got the 1 Ringmate Rock. You've got the Hordling Outburst, which is just hand-in-hand with Stoke the Flames is what you want to be doing. Crackling Doom, not only good against the things you mentioned, but also Heroic, a deck that might be on the uptick with the Devotion decks coming up.
For sure.
Wild Slash, Thoughtseize, Sorin, just good cards you want to be doing.
Right. Thoughtseize is great, but it's not that great against every deck. So I don't think I had 3 of them originally, but the more matches I played, the more I really wanted Sorin. Sorin just helps you do so much. It helps you race a lot of different decks. It can block very effectively. You can turn a match where you're very far behind Sorin +1 swing, gain 10 life, and all of a sudden you just can't really lose the game anymore. Plus, against control decks, it just provides an attacker for free. They have 2 things that they have to deal with. So Sorin's really powerful.
And we've seen that in the standard format. A lot of people who have kind of been against the life game plan, dating back many versions of standard ago, is just kind of the thing you can be doing in this standard format. You look at the green-white deck, you look at all of the Jeskai decks, just gaining life, very powerful.
Yeah. The only card in here that I was very skeptical of is Wingmate Rock. As I know Mark Nesico wrote an article about it. He had a Wingmate Rock, and we were talking about it, and I was just I can't imagine this card is fine in the main. There's no way. And he's just it's really, really good. You'll be surprised how often you get to draw it and play it and get value out of it. And I mean, so far I've been thoroughly impressed with it through testing and against people, and also in my last match it ended up providing me a blocker for Pelucranos and then allowed me to gain some life.
So what does that card have to do to get more numbers in the deck?
I mean, you'd have to like raise your curve a little bit, so I think you might have to drop the number of outpost siege, or maybe post board you want it. But the problem is your list is so tight because you want to try and keep, very low to the ground, but post board you want to come kind of a Mardu control deck in a sense against a lot of different decks.
Speaking of the sideboard, here's another card popping up thanks to the green-white devotion deck. Everyone's been mentioning it, Archfiend of Depravity.
I am absolutely sold on it. I did some testing against green-white. One of the things about testing is it's really hard to figure out if a card is good or not unless you draw the card exactly when you need to. So I put it to the side, turn 5, untapped, slammed Archfiend past. My opponent just lost the game after that. They just couldn't really keep up with which Archfiend. They can do so much. Like even during the Iron Step, they would just mastery a couple times and it just wasn't enough because they just have to sack down to 2. And if you have Hordeling Outburst, you have infinite blockers. Butcher helps you raise. And Archfiend is a 5/4 flyer. So on occasion, it will trade with the Butcher. It blocks Wingmate very effectively. Deals, for the same reason that Butcher's good, it deals 5 damage.
Just a 5 damage clock. Speaking of Mastery of the Way, or the Unseen, you have a couple here in your board as well for the grindier matchups.
Yeah, it's great against control decks too. I like against control decks the way this deck really plays out is you have a lot of different threats and you want to be flexible as possible. And Mastery really closes the door on them because you can just play a Mastery on turn 2, play a creature on turn 3, then manifest over and over and over again, and they have to find an answer for it. And then after they find an answer for it, you just have a 7-card hand because you've been drawing cards this entire time.
All right, you've got an In Hostilities, a couple of Valorous Stance, a card that's just been very powerful in the standard format. Your extra Thoughtseize, got a Sarkin in here, all pretty much regulars, but you got 3 Stormbreath Dragons in the board too.
Yeah, I originally, when I played Red-White, I had 4 in the main. And then after Ben Stark made the finals of GP Memphis, I noticed he had 3 Stormbreaths and an incredibly low curve. Like he just had a very, very low curve in post board. He just boarded into Stormbreaths. And it's just very, very hard for people to beat Stormbreath or interact with it. But game 1, when your plan is to outpost siege, burn them out, Stormbreath's maybe not as good. You definitely want it in some matchups, and that's why it's there, but maybe not every matchup.
All right. Well, the deck looks very powerful. We've seen it a long time ago, and it's kind of fallen off, but now it looks like a great time to be playing Mardu. After 2 rounds, you're 2-0. Hope to see you climb on that leaderboard, trying to get yourself another bye. You have 1 so far, but you're looking for number 2.
For Season 2, I'm 1 point behind Todd currently, so hopefully after this weekend, I'll jump over him and get my second bye for Season 2.
Well, we'll all be watching. Thanks for sitting down with me here on the sideboard, Rudy. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Dallas.